Welcome to When Love Hurts, a podcast that explores the abuse of women by men through women's stories and expert insight.
We break down what abuse really is beyond physical violence and look at its deep emotional, psychological, and societal impact.
This podcast is designed for everyone, survivors, support persons, and professionals.
Let's begin. Welcome to episode 3 of the When Love Hurts podcast. I'm Jo Neal, and with me is my co-host, Alison Epp. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we have Jill Corey and Karen McCandless-Davis, our resident experts on the topic of women abuse. And today we are going to continue talking about something we've already been discussing, power and control. We're going to dive in more detail and introduce you to a helpful tool. But first of all, Karen?
Yeah, let's pause for a moment for a land acknowledgement. We are on the unceded territory of the WSÁNEĆ people on the far west coast of Canada.
Thank you. So, how's everybody doing? We're having fun?
Woo-wee! We should maybe let people in on this very cool thing, which we are together. We are together filming the first few episodes of When Love Hurts. We're in a beautiful home, in a beautiful location, enjoying one another. Last night we were in the hot tub together.
Yeah, we
were. Very fun.
It was fun.
So
it's really special because we never get to really see each other in person. We do so much virtually.
Yeah.
And so even when I walked in the first time, I'd known Karen for a while, and I was like, oh my goodness, you're tall. Like, you're taller than I expected you.
Yeah.
Or like let's hug for the first time. It's just really cool.
Yeah.
So it's great to invite the listeners into that. We hope that you're picking up on that sense of being together that we are having.
Yeah.
Welcome to our gathering.
Yes. So before we start, as we said in the first episode, it might sound like we were talking about you or sharing a story that might relate to your story a lot. But so many of these stories are so common because the tactics used are so common. So these stories that we share today, they don't identify one person, one story, one experience. They are just common tactics, and they share a vast variety of women's experiences.
Yeah, and if we are sharing something that might be a little bit more specific, we've changed details. So we're consciously working to protect women's identities.
Yes.
In previous episodes, we've referred to power and control a number of times. And so in this episode, we're going to look more deeply and in more detail. And we want to share with you both some of the names that we put to these tactics of abuse, but more importantly, how women experience them in their lives. We think that this is another really important support for women alongside the cycle of abuse. So the cycle of abuse helps us see the pattern, but it doesn't name the details of some of those tactics that abusive men use. So it's like we're kind of hitting it from two directions now. We're going to see the pattern, and then we're going to break down what happens within each of those phases in terms of more detailed tactics.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And we are talking about power and control, and you will have noticed that we're talking about women's experiences of abuse from a male partner. That's our area of expertise. That's what Jill and I particularly have been doing for a long time. So it's the area that we feel that we can speak about with some confidence and so on. But we, of course, are not forgetting that abuse can happen in any relationship if one person has more power than the other person and uses that to diminish, oppress, control the other person. So, and as we talk about tactics of abuse today, some listeners might think about their boss, or they might think about what they experienced from a parent growing up, right? So a teacher can be abusive to a student and so on. So any place where there's a power difference. We also definitely want to name that we know abuse happens in same-sex relationships, happens sadly for trans people. In fact, statistically, trans people are at high risk of abuse. So we're talking about what we have the most experience with. But if you're living a different reality as a listener, you can take what's helpful and apply it to your own reality. Or, if you're a counselor that is working with same-sex couples, you can take this material and apply it to your work. Yeah. We are diving into thinking about the power and control wheel. And we want to let you know that you can actually download a visual of this, and that might be helpful if you haven't seen the power and control wheel before. If you go to whenlovehurts.ca and go to resources, you can download a PDF and you'll get a page and it'll have the power and control wheel. But let me just describe it for you so you can bring it to mind. At the center of the wheel are the words power and control. And then around it is a wheel with, various kind of pieces of pie that make up a wheel. And each of those pieces of pie are different types of abuse. So they're different tactics of abuse. I'll just name some of them now, and then we're going to dive into and explore them more. But psychological abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, social abuse, financial abuse. So, we're going to talk about all of those more. But you can keep that image in your mind of this wheel of different tactics of abuse. And at the center is the power and control wheel. And, as counselors, if we're doing this exercise with women, either in group or one-on-one, we just give them the categories, the different categories of abuse, and they give us examples.
Yeah.
But today in our conversation, we'll share some examples. Yeah.
So let's start with the psychological piece of the pie, if you like. I think that gaslighting really fits this particular area. And gaslighting, you might have heard of the term, you might not, but it comes from the 1944 film Gaslight, starring Ingrid Bergman, where her husband basically convinces her that she's losing her mind because he keeps turning down the gas lights. And she says, "Oh, is the light getting dimmer in here?" And he says, "No." And he does other things as well, moves things around. She can hear the noise. He denies it. He makes little changes in her environment. I've heard of women sharing that their partners are doing this kind of thing, and maybe a pile of papers was on the desk and it goes missing. He denies that it was even there, or men denying that they've said things in conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it really can be such a disconcerting experience.
Even when you say that, denying, I think that's really central to this experience. There's another way, and we talked about it in the honeymoon, that she experiences him one way, and then he's different in the outside world with friends and family and work, and he denies that he's different.
Yeah.
And so it makes women feel even more responsible for his behavior, because it feels like, well, he's only like that with me, and he thinks he's the same everywhere. It's so crazy making.
Yeah. Yeah. So confusing.
Yeah. So confusing.
And Jill, you had a great example.
Yeah. We were traveling around the province, and we gathered and heard lots of women's stories in the province of BC. And one woman was telling me about her partner. On the outside, it looked like he was being very caring, and took her to hospital because she was hearing voices in her head. And he was the one that the healthcare providers kind of gave permission to tell her story for her, which is very common, that when women don't appear kind of okay, they let the partner describe their medical conditions or their mental conditions. And so he said, she's hearing voices and I think she needs to be hospitalized. She's a danger to herself. So she was hospitalized. And while she was there, she asked a friend of hers to go back to the house and pick up some toiletries. And when the friend went in the home, she flipped on the light switches, and it set off an audio system of voices. So he'd actually designed a system of voices, and he denied that he was hearing anything.
Yeah.
And so she felt it was in her head. And so this may feel like an extreme example, and perhaps it is, but it does demonstrate the extent to which men will go to create the illusion for women that they're not of sound mind and capable.
Yeah, that they're crazy, right?
They're the crazy ones.
Yeah.
So that's psychological abuse. There are a couple examples. Another part of the on the wheel is physical abuse. And it's important to talk about this one. First of all, lots of women don't ever experience physical abuse. And I just think because their partners are smart enough to know there might be consequences to that, right? Like if you assault someone and leave marks, there might be some consequences. The police might be called, something might happen. So lots of men don't use that really kind of obvious physical abuse. Some men who are abusive will do things like they'll go to punch their partner, but then pull their punches, or they'll block exits, which we would put actually under physical abuse.
Right. Yeah.
Driving recklessly with her in the car or her and the children in the car, we would put under physical abuse. So part of what we want people to be thinking about is expanding that category a bit, throwing things in her direction. So, they don't quite hit her, but they almost hit her. Like that's physical abuse, right?
Yeah.
Like anything that threatens your sense of physical well-being is physical abuse. And lots of men who are abusive are smart enough to do that in ways that they don't have any consequences for.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the pieces of the pie, right? Again, we said in episode 1, some people think abuse is only physical.
Yeah.
And this really helps us move away from that narrative.
Can I add one to that? It's one of these ones that you might not think of as being physical, but is. The guy chasing the woman when she's trying to leave, maybe they're having a conversation and she needs to have a break. He goes after her, right?
Yeah.
He's banging on the door.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be typically thought of as physical abuse, right?
Yeah.
But I think that would go under that category.
Yep. Yeah. And it's very intimidating to have a really angry man banging on your door, right?
Yeah.
It causes a threat to your sense of physical
exactly.
well-being.
Another way that it shows up, which is different again, is that if women are substance using, and often they're using substances as a way to cope with what's happening, he may have introduced her to drugs and got her addicted, and then he has control over whether he keeps providing or withdrawing the drugs for her, and so he can either force her to use, or she chooses to use because it's safer for her than because she doesn't really have a choice to refuse, or he just withdraws the drugs so that she doesn't have a choice. But also, women describe that they're kind of last on the needle, or like the most high risk of the drug use, so that he has a clean needle and then maybe others use, and then she gets it. So there's lots of ways that her physical well-being is at risk.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And such a lack of regard for her physical well-being. Right?
Yeah.
Another category is verbal abuse. And, over the years, women have described the most horrendous things that their partners have said to them. Like, I could not repeat those words. And I think for someone who hasn't lived this, it's so shocking to know that that their partners just use the worst language. Yeah. Terrible, terrible verbal abuse. And so attacking of her as a person, as a human being.
Right.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I've heard women share too of like, it might not even be that bad to the outside ear, but he knows her so well that if he were to say, oh, you are acting like your mother.
Right.
Yes.
Or like he knows exactly how to cut her where it hurts her the most.
Such a good point.
Like just, oh, you're wearing that tonight. Like just, it doesn't have to be that strength of amplified anger or intensity.
Yeah.
That's such a good point.
Yeah, another one is something called conversational control, which I remember when I first came across this and thinking, wow, that's so interesting. I would never think of that as an abuse tactic. But think about never really being able to have a conversation with somebody and have what you're saying respected. Having the other person always control when you're going to have a conversation. If he wants to have it, it's fine. But if he doesn't, then it's not going to happen. He always has the last word. Maybe he turns things around on her. Not necessarily something that's obviously abusive. And yet it really is, because when we're in relationship with people, how do we have that relationship? We talk to each other. We have to talk. We have to collaborate. We have to share. So that can be a key tactic.
That's so interesting. And, what it makes me think about, Joe, is that, we use the language of conversation, of course, and women often, they are seeking to have conversation and they're using words to try to build a bridge between themselves and their partner. But their partner is actually using words as a weapon, right? Flipping what she said around, blaming her, turning it around. So he's doing verbal abuse. He isn't actually having a conversation. But of course, the woman is seeking to have a conversation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Another category is financial, and this is such an important one to talk about because it's really one of the big pieces of the pie. We really hear from women, and interesting that I don't think in the broader society people are very tuned into financial abuse, and it can take so many forms. Women have so many examples of this, but it might look like, he controls all the money, even if she's earning money as well. She may just, sort of have an allowance or something, or so she's having to ask for everything, for new clothes for the kids. Or for me, one of the most extreme forms of this was he actually locked the freezer. So she had to ask to get a loaf of bread or to get the hamburger out for dinner or whatever, right? But that kind of controlling all of the finances. And it's such a powerful way to control a woman because we need money to do anything, right? To put some gas in our car, to go do something, to just even
social life.
Any kind of social life is going to cost money.
It's interesting when you think about, like, as we work with women after leaving, how often women discover that he's been hiding money in other accounts.
Yep.
And putting assets in his name only, or transferring assets to a family member. So like, there's so many variations of this control over the finances. But one of them often doesn't come to light until after women leave, and there's a more legal component and investigation.
And it's part of what traps women, right, is the financial piece, because she knows that if she leaves, he's gonna lock up all the money one way or another, right? He's gonna cancel the cards, he's gonna move money away, right? So it's one of the reasons women are trapped, is that they know they can't afford to leave and go establish another home.
That makes me think of lots of women's stories where they're sharing that their partner was like, I want you to be able to stay home with our kids, and I will go to work. Meanwhile, she's without employment for years and years and years, and he's the one that's bringing all the money in, and then that's used to control her because now he's the one bringing in the money and she's not employed. And so leaving is more difficult because now she has to get back into the work world and in the workplace and hasn't been employed for years.
And just naming another reality that sometimes arises too is that sometimes the man insists that the woman that the woman manages all the money. So she has to pay all the bills. She has to keep track of everything. He doesn't want to be bothered with any of that. But so on one level, it feels to the woman, like, well, I'm actually running this.
Control, right?
I'm paying the bills. But so often when women really unpack that, what they describe for us is, he spends a lot of money on his hobbies and what he's interested in, whatever that might be, buying cars or playing sports or whatever. And so there isn't actually enough money to cover the basic bills. And then she's doing it wrong, right? He
blames her.
He blames her. It can show up in so many different ways. But I mean, one of the ways women might notice is that they just feel a lot of financial tension and stress and a lot of fear around trying to bring up anything about the finances.
And Karen, when you say it's like, it is definitely one of the bigger pieces of the pie that women fill in so completely, and it's not one that is often thought of by others. I think there's still an idea of thinking about the dominant discourse that women have achieved equality, that women are working, that they have their own money and they have their own kind of employment status. And so it's really, for me, it's really important that we're uncovering for women all the underbelly of how untrue that is, that we have not achieved equality, and individually in relationships, many women are not experiencing equality.
Absolutely.
And so you sort of said this already, Jill, but just to say, so often women at the point of separation, they don't know anything about their finances, right? In the name of, I will take care of this. You don't need to worry about this. He's, in quotes, managed the money, and she has no idea. She has no idea about savings, pension, anything.
She has no idea that he got a visa out in her name and has run up $200,000 in debt. Often debt comes to light only after a woman's left. And, or women know that there's a debt there and it's in her name. And that's part of why she can't leave, because she'll be responsible.
The number of women who describe going into a relationship in pretty good shape financially,
absolutely.
and leaving and having to declare
Just
bankruptcy.
devastating.
And maybe we could name, because part of the dominant discourse is this idea that she takes him to the cleaners, right? Oh, it just infuriates me anytime I hear that, right? And that is not true. In the laws of Canada, you were supposed to get 50% of the assets. So nobody's taking anyone to the cleaners. But the truth is that abusive men leave women financially devastated. And we don't have any language to describe that reality.
Yeah. Gosh, I feel like we could keep going with this one.
That's a big one.
Yeah. But let's move on to another piece of the pie, social abuse. So this is an interesting one, I think. Again, like not something that you would really think of necessarily when you're thinking of abuse. So an example would be that an abusive man might go to friends and family to tell, his narrative, which is basically a complete fabrication of what's actually happening. It's completely untrue, but it's believed because people know the honeymooning side of him. So, and they don't have an idea that, why would anybody do this? It's just not something that we comprehend, that men are out there actually lying about their partners and spreading all sorts of untruths to isolate her, basically. That's what that tactic's
so
about,
we kind of
right?
take that behavior at face value. And I think what we're trying to help people understand is not to do that perhaps there's a differential path to be thinking about, that maybe it's care, but also maybe it's control.
Yeah.
And I would say so often the lie is that she's having affairs. Right?
Yep.
Or that she's abusive. That's a really common one, that abusive men claim that their partners are abusive, or that she's crazy. Right?
I was going to say that.
Those are the three typical three most common
stories.
Yeah.
So if you hear that,
Be curious.
just go, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Be curious.
One that stands out to me is you mentioned isolation. And I think that is such a big part of this social abuse is the isolation. And I've heard so many stories of women sharing that, well, we moved to a rural part of the province and and I was by myself in a little farmhouse and I didn't have my family close and I didn't have anywhere to go. I couldn't just leave. I was so by myself and he was all I had.
So vulnerable. I remember a woman, and I think there's a lot of common threads in this, but that she was so embarrassed about his behavior that she stopped bringing friends to the house or going to see family because she was so ashamed that she was in that relationship with him, but just embarrassed and knew that she was going to be in trouble afterwards. A woman recently told me that during her pregnancy, she was visited by a midwife, and he was like this wonderful, caring guy that was really involved in her pregnancy. And as soon as she left, he turned on her so violently for telling the midwife things and like oversharing and not looking after herself. And there's so much around, again, the discrepancy between what women are experiencing and what we see publicly.
That social abuse can creep into so many aspects of her life, right? Making it really hard for her to maintain a job because he's always calling her at work, sabotaging her attempts to do further education. It can just so many aspects of her life. But the end result is isolation often. Another category would be spiritual abuse. And having supported women from every major religion, we can say with some confidence that this can occur in any religion. And what it typically looks like, or often looks like, is that the man uses a part of scripture or an idea from the faith as a weapon to diminish the woman, to control her. And, obviously scripture should never be used as a weapon in any way at all. Or sometimes he cuts her off from opportunities to connect with her faith community, suggests it's silly or foolish or something, when in fact it's a great resource for her. Or definitely, if he is of a faith, then his faith is superior and hers is not good.
Or what about his understanding of the faith is better than hers, right? And she needs to listen to him, perhaps as maybe the head of the household. That might be a concept in the faith, or she needs to be submissive, that kind of thing.
And that
Which is not true, just to be clear. That's not
Thank
true.
you, Jill. Yes. It's not true.
Sort of selecting out bits without the whole context.
the whole context of what's
exactly.
actually being
Yeah.
said there. Yeah, and that when men who are abusive choose to use spirituality to control, it's a really devastating and hurtful tool.
Yeah.
Right. It's so often I think of it's like they're saying this is what God thinks about you, right? Like what a powerful way to diminish a woman, right? God thinks you're a hypocrite, and things like that.
And one way I think that professionals can understand that, and seeing like triangulation is a term that we use, where you're like pinning two against one.
Yeah.
And when you just described that as he's saying God and I are against you.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
it can really feel like that for the woman.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's so small in that position.
Yeah. Sometimes they go to the faith community and tell those lies that you were talking about before, that she's having affairs or she's crazy.
She's crazy.
Yeah, or she won't let him have the children.
Right.
To have him. And for women who aren't practicing in a faith or identify as Christian or other religions, that can sometimes show up in kind of new age ideas, right?
for sure.
Like, meditation and spirituality and kind of a way of being in the world. And she's always inferior to his way of practicing his spirituality.
Right. Yeah.
So
Great point.
it's the same weapon. It's just, again, misused. And what you'll hear, listeners, is this idea that he's always superior.
Yes.
And the way he gains his control and superiority is by making her inferior. Right? It's not by his own actual superiority, but rather by burying her and standing on top of that.
Yeah.
Let's just name here, knowing that we're going to come back to it, that lots of times, it's so heartbreaking, but lots of times, I would say Christian women is the area that I've had the experience with, are led to believe that they can't say no to their husband in terms of sex. If he wants sex, how he wants sex, she's obligated to say yes to that. And in some ways that's using both spirituality and sexual abuse and bringing those together. But I know we're going to come to sexual abuse in a few moments, but I just wanted to flag that as a really devastating part of spiritual abuse.
Misinterpretation.
Misinterpretation,
Again.
yes.
Yeah. I think like the point I see is like so much of this can cross over, right?
Yeah.
So many of the tactics aren't just one, but they can fit into different categories all over. Like that piece is spiritual and sexual and somewhat psychological. And emotional and physical, right? There's so many aspects that cross over that you can't always just put it into this perfect clean cut pie. And I get it. There's lines that get blurred a lot of the time.
Yeah, and if a woman wanted to put the same tactic in more than one piece of the pie, that's totally fine.
Exactly.
Yeah, in fact, human behavior is that it wouldn't be that specific. And we really want, we'll just say this now, we really want listeners to think not what category is the right place to put it, but really where would you put it? What is it for you? And again, it might be in several of them, but there isn't a right answer for these. It really is, how do you experience it and where would you put it?
So another area of abuse, a tactic, is using the children. And again, there's so many examples, but just one is where, say, there's some kind of high-level sports that the abusive man really wants his kids to be involved in. And often these sports involve a large amount of money. They involve an awful lot of time for the parent. And the mum can find herself having to take the kids to all of these practices. It can really impact how she's feeling. You know, she's got so much that she's dealing with. But she has to take the kids to these programs when a lesser program would be okay, right? She also has to deal with the impacts of such a high intensity program on the kids, and when they get dysregulated or sometimes they get injured.
They don't want to do it.
They just don't want to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
The children's sports is certainly a big category. Or I'm thinking too often, you know, when mom and dad are living together still, he uses the kids in lots of ways, maybe teaching them to swear at her or treat her poorly. Sometimes when they're separated, dad tells a lot of lies about mom, that she's crazy, or she lies, or you can't trust her, or she broke up the family. We would be together if it wasn't for her. Right. And so it's using the children to hurt her in many different ways. Typically men who are abusive post-separation insist on 50% custody, and they typically get that. But then women hear these stories of how their children are actually not being cared for. Sometimes young children being left entirely alone for long chunks of time, or being shown movies that are completely inappropriate, or spending all of their time on devices. And, so the dad wants the children 50% of the time to avoid child support, to win,
and to hurt,
and to hurt.
Exactly.
But he doesn't actually do the work of parenting.
No.
And sometimes does things like, drives around and the kids don't have seatbelts on, or takes them biking without helmets, knowing that that's going to terrify the woman, upset the woman, distress the woman.
Yeah, I think I've heard this from Dr. Christine Cacciella a lot, of how so much of it is just impacting that mother-child relationship. And it's taking time away from the mom, even like having them committed to all these sports, or it's just taking that time away. And Dr. Cacciella talks a lot about how really a part of what that tactic is doing is trying to really break that bond.
Break the mother-child bond.
Another tactic that is really important to share is the cultural piece. And this is one that can have so many layers and has been shared by many women. And there's some really great research that's been done on this. And so I'm taking it from that and hearing the stories from other women. And what they've shared is often their immigration status can be threatened, but the isolation piece is also really, really challenging, right? Like you come to Canada as an immigrant with a partner that may have been abusive in their home country, may have not, and then starts abusing once they're here. But then their community, they buy into his honeymooning or whatever it is. And then she's so isolated if she leaves that she has no one left here. And then once she does leave, there's the layers upon layers of complications after that. Like maybe English isn't the first language that she knows, and now she has to learn another language, try to find employment, figure out where is my immigration status at without being married to this person. There's so many different layers that you unpeel that make it really, really challenging.
Yeah, and sometimes abusive men don't want their partners to practice their cultural. They don't want to they don't want them to teach those things to their children. Lots of ways of sabotaging her cultural expression. Yeah, and we've really come to know that sometimes people think, oh, certain cultures are just inherently more abusive than other cultures, and we don't think that's true. We think that within every culture there are ideas about valuing women, and then there are some ideas that can be used to diminish or control a woman. And, we might even just point to within white culture, within evangelical Christian, some evangelical Christian groups use patriarchy to really diminish and control.
Let's talk a little bit about sexual abuse as one of the forms of power and control. It can be what we would consider the most understandable, which is a sexual assault by a male partner against the woman. But because we have such strong beliefs historically that that's not abuse, that it's acceptable, that women kind of are forced to agree to whatever he wants and meet his needs. Certainly today, I think it's recognized that that is an assault, but it's not always held up in courts. But there's also men using pornography and comparing his partner to those women and asking her to be more like or to do what he's seen, or blaming her for his use of pornography. If you were more available to me, or if you were sexier to me, I wouldn't have to use pornography. So the use of pornography can be very hurtful and so degrading for women, so that's one way that they maintain control. And so then women sometimes feel like, okay, I need to do more to keep him interested in me. And that's not what a relationship is about. Sometimes a partner might just simply reject her, just I remember an older woman's story a long time ago. They were married for 55 years, and for all 55 years, he had a picture of his first love on his bedside table.
Oh, my goodness.
As a reminder to her that she was never
Wow.
enough.
Yeah.
So she spent her whole life trying to prove to him that she was lovable and that she was worth it, including doing many things that she did not want to do.
Right. Yeah.
As a way to try to convince him to see her as
Yep.
lovable. And then affairs. I mean, I think all of us hear that abusive men have affairs. And I think about that as like we just embolden men to be able to use sex in the way that they want, and that their needs are first and foremost. And if
Yes.
they're not getting them there, then they'll get them here. But the impact on the woman is so painful, and again invites her to either feel this kind of shame and embarrassment and not enough, or do more to try to meet his needs or please him. And either way, this is not consensual and it's not mutual.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So often I hear counselors treating those as separate things.
Yes.
There's the affair, but
Yeah.
then there's also the abuse. So, but those are
Right.
separate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And here we're
and they're
saying
not.
they're not.
It's a tactic. I was just thinking about a story, and again, this is not just one woman's story. I've heard it a few times, but if a guy doesn't get sex, maybe he's not like hugely explosive, but he goes into a sulk every single time.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe he refuses to cook, or he starts to be really quite difficult to live with.
Yeah. Won't take the kids to school the next morning.
Yeah, exactly.
When he's agreed to that, but now he
Yeah,
won't do it. 'cause
exactly.
She didn't give him sex last night. Yeah.
Right. And we wouldn't necessarily think of that as abuse, but it is.
You know, Joe, I was thinking between episodes, I was thinking about one of the things we didn't talk about in the tension part of the honeymoon is that how women walk on eggshells.
Yeah.
And that they know there's going to be a consequence for many things, but not everything. And that's the eggshells. It's like what's going to blow up and what's not going to blow up. And so it's like that. I know there might be a consequence. I don't know what it is. I don't know if there is. But that's the power in all of this.
Exactly.
Is that women know, men have taught them there's going to be a payback. Women are going to pay for trying to say no, trying to hold a boundary, trying to protect their kids, that there isn't any way for them to navigate without risk.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not predictable, right? Maybe his behavior, if she doesn't want to have sex, he behaves, in some awful way. But maybe he doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe one time he's like, okay, I get that. Yeah. How is she supposed to know?
Well, she can't know, and that's part of the power is that unpredictability.
Yeah.
Right.
Another piece is now once the divorce has happened or the post-separation period is starting, litigation abuse can be a really powerful tactic. And that can be filing a number of petitions against her or just to the courts, where it's really drowning the woman in all these court petitions and legal proceedings that, one, not only drains her financially because she's having to either hire a lawyer or pay for these court petitions, or she's having to represent herself and is now having to stay up till 4 a.m. trying to figure out, how am I supposed to respond to this?
Preparing those
and prepare for this in a way that a judge will actually be able to read it and hear my story. And this can be really devastating.
And I think we would say now that almost all of the women that we're supporting post-separation are dealing with really big parts of litigation abuse. And, listeners, if they do download that PDF, they'll see that it isn't listed as one of the 12 on the wheel. And really because of this, there's been such an increase around litigation abuse over the last maybe 10 years or so. But it's just, I think, a good reminder that the wheel it's never kind of finished, and you can always add another piece to it. An individual woman might name something and want to add another piece of the pie to it that's playing out with her, how he's using her in-laws or something, right? It might be a whole huge,
another one is social media.
Yes.
Like that's a pretty new one as we've come into this world of social media, and how social media can be used as a tactic. Where it's another way to access information or to stalk or to control the narrative. And use power. So really we're saying, like, this isn't an expansive, we can't possibly share every example and little story, but we hope, I guess is the right word, is we hope that you could start to see that there is stories woven in all of these pieces. It wasn't just one isolated event, and that there's these patterns that we see
over time, right?
Yeah. It's like you take a little zoom in on one moment, and then now we're zooming out and you're seeing the whole picture of all these different examples.
Yeah. And so often when women do work with the power and control wheel, it's so eye-opening, because often women will have been thinking about some of the most extreme things he did, the time that he left the kids and I on the highway and took off, and we were, like thinking of some of those really extreme things. And when they do the power and control wheel, women typically say, wow, like abuse has crept into every aspect of our relationship, or almost every aspect of our relationship. So like any exercise, it's both good news and bad news for women, right? Like there's definitely a validating piece, right? All these things that haven't felt okay with me are not actually okay, and they're abusive, right? It gives you kind of an assessment of how things are, right? And so there's validation. And sometimes the bad news part might also be if the woman is feeling really hoping that he's going to change and that the relationship can be saved, this can be hard to see.
So hard.
Oh, wow. Like he's financially abusive and he's socially abusive and he's using the children, right? Like that it's in so many parts. It isn't just those kind of big events
exactly.
that I've been thinking about.
We're just remembering how often women just they have a sense that something's wrong and they can't quite put their finger on it because they're not going to be thinking, oh, he's abusing me.
Right.
They think of every other reason, and so this gives them the answer.
Well, and everybody else is giving
them
the other reasons, right?
Like exactly.
They've gone to counseling and they've been told it's a communication issue or it's a family of origin issue or what's a boundary issue or
and now they understand. They know.
Yeah, really just building on that, women might come and say, once in a while my partner just disappears and goes to the basement. It's like, there's the book that affirms that, like, men need to go in their cave.
Yes.
But also just the idea that people need a break. And so in isolation, some of those things that are tactics get spun as normal relationship behavior.
Yeah.
But when women see it all together, that's the power of it. And so, it's like they test the waters. My partner's doing this. It's like, oh yeah, that's pretty normal in relationships, right? Which we all have, the world has a tendency to make those things normal rather than to name it. But there's something so powerful when women see it all together. It's like, it isn't just about being cruel to the pet, which, maybe I felt uncomfortable with, but he has a good reason for it. Or maybe, she's made to feel that she doesn't know how to train dogs, but he's been doing it all his life. And so that gets filed away as, I guess I don't know that much about it. But when it's all together, it's like it adds up to a picture that, as you say, is this broader way of thinking about it rather than the minutia. And we want women to know that minutia really is painful and important.
Yeah, so painful.
Yeah. That's a really good word, minutia.
Yeah.
Did you say that over and over?
Yeah.
Minutia.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to add a light note to it. Minutia.
It makes me think of that analogy, death by 1,000 paper cuts, right?
Yes.
Not that these are paper cuts. They're worse than that. But
another woman after doing this exercise said, it's like he's been dropping pieces of gravel on me for years, but now there's a truckload of gravel on me, right?
That's such a good analogy.
They really add up.
Yeah.
So when we look at the wheel as a whole, if you can sort of, again, picture that wheel as a whole, it is a wheel. It's not a pyramid, right? We're not saying, okay, maybe physical, sexual abuse is the worst. We'll put that at the top and then we'll come down. That's not what we're doing. We're really equating all of them because they're all devastating for women. And one woman might point to a type of abuse and say, the financial abuse was what was worse for me, but other women would point to something else. The wheel really helps us move away from that dominant discourse idea that physical abuse is the only type of abuse that matters or is the only one that's really hard or whatever.
Or the real abuse.
Yeah,
right?
it's the only real abuse.
Yeah. And the wheel also helps us understand a bit better that, if he is doing some type of abuse and there is a consequence to that, he'll probably stop doing that type of abuse. So if he has been physically abusive and there were some consequences, the police came, he's got to do court-ordered counseling, maybe something like that, he probably is not going to be physically abusive again.
Yeah.
But he's going to ramp up in other areas,
Yeah,
right? The
totally.
other types of abuse are going to ramp up. And that's so confusing for women. And sometimes women say, like, he hasn't hit me in 2 years.
Yes.
So why am I so anxious, or whatever it is, right? And
Yeah.
when we do the wheel and she gets a chance to fill out all the different types of abuse, that really answers the question for her. You know, and if if any type of abuse isn't working for him anymore, he can move to another type.
Including if she moves away from the relationship, he doesn't have as much access
Yeah.
to some things. So he's forced to call on others.
Right. Other areas.
And sometimes that's when he really ramps up the social abuse, right?
Yes.
When he goes and tells a lot of lies about her because he doesn't have her in the house anymore.
Yeah.
So he breaks down her community in various ways.
I think it can bring up a lot of questions for women too, as once they go through this, wondering like, am I abusive? Have I done? Have I been abusive too? Because I maybe did some of these things, or wondering, is he aware of what he's doing? Is he aware of the behavior he's got? Why do I feel relief when I see this, or I feel relief once he has done some of these tactics? There's questions that can be really confusing that come up when you go through this.
You know, one of the things that we want to make sure we've said is that in the image of the cycle of the wheel, in the center of it is power and control.
Yeah.
Right? Just as a reminder to listeners, that's the motive. It's not about just naming all these small or big pieces of control, but the intention for him is power and control. And so when a woman might say, well, I yell back, or I've done some of these things, it's like, what's the intention, and then what's the impact? Right? Is he afraid of you? Does he change his behavior because he's fearful of your response? But it's a really important question, because women always want to take responsibility for their part. We've been taught so deeply to be responsible for our own actions. And so women do grapple with that through all of our contact with women. Like, what's my part? And also, Karen and I often say, distinguish between bad behavior. None of us are perfect in relationships, and we can all behave badly. We can lose our temper. We can slam a door. Not all of us, but there might be things that you've done that's not great behavior in a relationship, but it's not about trying to make somebody else afraid and gain power and control over them. And that may be helpful for listeners as a distinction.
Yeah, that our definition of abuse is that there's this cycle of honeymoon, tension, explosion, and then there's these multiple types of abuse, and the purpose of it all is power and control. So a woman might do something in response to, or even in protecting herself, and then be made to feel bad about it, certainly by her partner, maybe by others. But her intention isn't power and control, and there isn't that pattern either of honeymoon, tension, explosion. And I think part of what's so helpful about this tool is it really clarifies for women, because women are spending so much time trying to understand why he's doing what he's doing. He's saying it's because of stress, or it's because of his childhood, or it's because of his trauma, or whatever it is.
And society is telling all those things.
Right? Absolutely. And the wheel just really makes it kind of simple, right? Like, he's doing this to have power and control, right? Not because of his childhood or any of the other things, but because he wants power and control in the relationship. So women can spend less emotional energy trying to figure him out when they're given this tool, right?
On that note, we do have an episode coming up to sort of answer some of these questions, because I know it's important for women to get some of those answers, because it can be really confusing in their head. Stay tuned for that episode.
So what changes for women once they've completed the power and control wheel for themselves? We've talked about that they get clarity. What else?
Well, I think it challenges, again, all the dominant discourses. So as listeners come along in this journey with us, you'll see that these tools are all designed to kind of reject the dominant discourse as lies that women are socialized into or forced into believing, and create a new narrative that's their own truth. And so I think the power and control wheel really achieves that in another way. So we have this idea in the dominant discourse that abusers are out of control, and they don't know what they're doing.
But just in the ways that they choose different tactics at different times, different types of abuse at different times, really points to how much choice and control he has, right? And he's not doing this to other people either, these tactics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it also really challenges the dominant discourse that both men and women, all men and women, are holding similar interests in a relationship. You know, everybody is wanting the best of the other, to be a fair partner, to, you know, build up the other. And this exercise really challenges that there are people, abusive people, who operate from a different belief system, and it's a power and control belief system. And in episode 5, we're going to really talk about like what is behind that belief system, right? Some people listening to this might be bringing forward a lot of questions for them about, well, why is it that some people operate so differently than relationship-oriented people? And we're going to take that on in episode 5.
I hope that as you've listened, you can hear that you are not alone, that these stories are very common, and you don't have to walk this alone. And so to further the analogy of the whitewater rafting, some of these tools, our hope is that this gives you the life raft, that you then are in this life raft with a life jacket on, and you have people with you, other women who've walked these same sort of experiences that can walk with you. You don't have to walk it alone. And it feels so isolating when you're in it, but you aren't alone.
I think it's such a fundamental belief for us that women should not have to do this alone. You cannot make sense of this because there's not enough kind of signposts in the world to help you interpret what is happening. And so we're happy that you're joining us in as we gather, and we encourage you to keep walking along with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to have more information, we've included the wheel in the show notes, and can also be accessed on the When Love Hurts website. So go there, download that. It's such a useful resource. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can access this content. More women can get answers and feel less alone. And we're already appreciating all of your support that's already been given. Thank you so much. We want to thank the generosity of MCC Canada for supporting us to make this first season. And if you would like another season, we are looking for another sponsor for season 2. Please get in touch through the website whenlovehurts.ca. See you next time.